On a cold morning in Manhattan, Marcus Wellington, a billionaire with a frozen heart, makes a decision that will change his life forever. In his arrogance, he orders a sick mother and her baby to be kicked out from the entrance of his luxurious skyscraper, ignoring their desperate pleas for compassion. But when the child crawls toward him, holding a hospital bracelet with the word "Daddy" handwritten on it, Marcus's world completely falls apart. In this devastating moment, he will discover that true power is not in punishing the vulnerable, but in recognizing when fate offers you a chance at redemption, even if it might be too late for everything that truly matters.
Hello. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. At the end, please rate the story. I will be happy to respond to you in the comments. Now, let's get to the story.
The alarm clock didn't need to ring. Marcus Wellington had already been awake since 5 a.m., every day for the past 20 years. His eyes opened with the precision of a Swiss watch, taking in the Italian marble ceiling of his penthouse on the top floor of one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings. The midnight silence wrapped the room like a black velvet cloak. Only the distant hum of traffic far below broke the stillness, a constant reminder that, even in the city that never sleeps, he was above everything and everyone. Both literally and figuratively, Marcus rose from the king-size bed with calculated movements, his bare feet touching the heated Carrara marble floor. Each step echoed softly throughout the spacious room, creating an almost hypnotic rhythm that matched his thoughts, already focused on the day's business. The routine was sacred. First, 15 minutes of exercise in his private gym, where state-of-the-art machines stood perfectly aligned like soldiers at attention. The sweat dripping down his forehead was deliberate, measured, controlled, just like everything else in his life. The shower lasted exactly 12 minutes. Water poured from multiple showers embedded in black marble, creating a private symphony that relaxed and simultaneously energized him. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the hot steam envelop his athletic body, the result of years of iron discipline and costly personal trainers. While drying off with custom Egyptian towels, his mind already ran through the numbers that would define his day. $8 billion. That sum wasn't just his fortune, it was his identity, his power, his reason for existing. Every penny had been earned with a coldness few could understand. Breakfast awaited him at the mahogany dining table, served by Helen, his housekeeper of nearly a decade. The 60-year-old woman moved like an efficient shadow, placing the folded financial newspaper beside his French porcelain cup, along with his fully charged phone and an Italian leather planner. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington," Helen murmured, eyes lowered. Marcus didn't even glance her way. His fingers drummed on the table as he flipped through the pages of the Wall Street Journal, absorbing information with the hunger of a predator studying its next prey. Wellington Corp stock had risen 3 points the night before, a small but steady satisfaction. The phone buzzed on the table. Marcus answered without checking the caller ID. "Wellington. Sir, this is Richard from accounting. About the report you asked for yesterday." "You should have called me 2 hours ago with those numbers," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "I'm surrounded by incompetence." On the other end, the employee's nervous breathing was audible. "Sir, I worked all night too. I don't want excuses. You're fired. Pack your things and be out of the building before 9. Marcus hung up before the man could respond. Helen continued pouring coffee as if nothing had happened. She had witnessed hundreds of these conversations over the years, each leaving behind a trail of lives destroyed. Collateral damage Marcus deemed necessary at exactly 7. Marcus went downstairs where his armored Mercedes-Benz limousine waited. The driver, a middle-aged man named James, held the door open with the rigid posture of a soldier. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington." Marcus stepped inside without a word, sinking into the soft leather as the car glided through the still, semi-empty streets of Manhattan. Through the tinted windows, he watched the city waking up, ordinary people rushing to their mediocre jobs, fighting for scraps while he controlled the feast. The phone rang again. This time, it was Patricia, his executive assistant. "Mr. Wellington, Mr. Emerson from Parker and Associates is on the line. He'd like to reschedule the 3 o'clock meeting to tell Emerson that if he can't keep his commitments, maybe he doesn't deserve to do business with me." "And Patricia?" "Yes, sir. That new girl at reception. What's her name? Jennifer? Fire her. She smiled at me yesterday." I can't stand employees who think we're friends. But sir, she's very efficient and… Patricia, are you questioning my decision? Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerously calm tone. No, sir. I'll take care of it immediately. Perfect. And find someone less friendly to replace her. Marcus hung up and leaned back in his chair, a cold smile playing on his lips. Power wasn't just about money. It was absolute control over people's lives. It was deciding who thrived and who failed with a simple flick of his fingers. The limousine came to a smooth stop in front of Wellington Plaza, the most prestigious office building in his empire. 53 floors of glass and steel soaring like a monument to his business genius. Every square foot was worth a fortune. Every tenant paid exorbitant prices for the privilege of doing business at a Wellington address. James jumped out quickly to open the door. Marcus emerged from the vehicle with the elegance of a king, adjusting the cuffs of his Italian silk shirt. His presence was magnetic and intimidating. Men and women on the sidewalk instinctively stepped aside, creating an invisible path for his passage. Then his eyes caught something that deeply disturbed him. At the main entrance of Wellington Plaza, beside the polished bronze doors, there was a small stain on the immaculate marble floor. It wasn't ordinary dirt. It looked like paint, maybe spray paint, forming a pattern he couldn't fully identify from a distance. Marcus stopped abruptly, his gaze fixed on the imperfections sullying the perfection of his domain. His fists clenched instinctively, his jaw tightening into a hard line. Someone had dared to vandalize his property. Someone had disrespected his territory. Anger began to boil in his chest like molten lava, but outwardly, his expression remained icy, controlled. Marcus Wellington did not explode in public. He planned his revenge with the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of a dictator. Whoever had done this was about to find out what happened when you challenged a man who considered the entire city his personal property. Marcus approached the entrance with measured steps, each one echoing against the marble like a hammer striking an anvil. The stain he had noticed from a distance now revealed itself in all its repulsive reality. It wasn't paint, but something far worse for his refined sensibilities. There, huddled against the polished granite wall of his building, was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 28 years old, but life had carved premature lines into her pale, thin face. Her blonde hair, once golden, now hung in dull, tangled strands around her slumped shoulders. The woman was coughing, a dry, raspy cough that seemed to tear at her throat with each spasm. Cradled in her arms, wrapped in blankets that had once been white, but now bore the marks of street life, a baby let out weak, intermittent cries. The sound was muffled, almost a desperate whisper blending with the distant noise of morning traffic. Marcus stopped 10 feet away, his face contorting in an expression of absolute disgust. The smell reached him, a mixture of dirt, sickness, and human despair that offended every refined fiber of his being. Instinctively, his right hand moved to cover his nose, while his dark eyes scanned the scene with the coldness of someone assessing a problem that needed to be eliminated. Unbelievable, he muttered through clenched teeth, his voice thick with contempt. Absolutely unbelievable. The woman lifted her eyes when she heard his voice. Her eyes were a faded blue, water that had once been crystal clear, but now reflected only fatigue and fear. She tried to shrink further against the wall, as if she could disappear into the cold marble. Marcus felt anger rising like a red tide in his chest. That thing was dirtying the entrance of his most valuable property. In a matter of minutes, multinational company executives would pass through here, investors who moved millions, men and women expecting to find absolute perfection associated with the Wellington name. And there was that human abomination, turning his entrance into a display of misery. Security! Marcus's voice thundered through the lobby, startling the woman and making the baby cry louder. Security now! 2 uniformed men immediately emerged from inside the building, their steps swift and efficient. Marcus knew them well. Thompson and Rodriguez, ex-military whom he paid generously to keep his property free from undesirables. Mr. Wellington? Thompson, a tall, muscular man, approached with deference. Marcus jabbed a sharp, accusing finger toward the woman. I want this scum removed from my property immediately. How did you let this happen? Sir, she must have arrived during the early hours when the patrol was. Rodriguez began to explain, but Marcus cut him off with a frosty glare. I don't want excuses. I want solutions. The woman heard every word. Trembling, she tried to stand, clutching the baby to her chest. Her shaky legs barely held her weight, and she leaned on the wall with the free hand. Please. Her voice was just a hoarse whisper, interrupted by another coughing fit that bent her over. Please, sir. Just until noon. The shelter opens at noon and... How dare you speak to me? Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as a razor. How dare you pollute the air I breathe with your pathetic pleas? The woman recoiled as if slapped. Tears began to stream down her dirty cheeks, leaving clean streaks on stained skin. The baby, sensing his mother's tension, cried louder, a sound piercing the morning air like a distant siren. My baby is sick, she managed to say between sobs. We have nowhere to go until... Please, sir, just a few hours. We won't bother anyone, I promise. Marcus felt his blood pressure rise. Every word from that filthy mouth was a personal insult. That creature was not only corrupting his property by her presence but now had the audacity to try to bargain with him. As if they were equals, as if she had any right to be there. Thompson, Rodriguez. His voice dropped to a dangerously calm tone. I want this infestation removed from my property. Now, use whatever force is necessary. Sir, the baby. Thompson hesitated, his eyes locking on the fragile child in the woman's arms. Marcus turned to glare at the security guard, his eyes burning with restrained fury. Are you questioning my orders, Thompson? Because if you are, I can assure you there are plenty of unemployed ex-military who would be happy to take your job. Thompson swallowed hard and squared his shoulders. No, sir. We'll take care of it immediately. Please, no. The woman's voice broke completely. He's just a baby? He hasn't done anything wrong. Please. Marcus felt a cold, cruel satisfaction as he saw the utter despair in her eyes. That was how the world worked. The strong ruled, and the weak begged. It was the natural order of things, and he was the embodiment of that universal truth. Your pathetic circumstances are not my responsibility, he said, each word delivered with surgical precision. You chose this life. You brought a child into a world you cannot support. Those are the consequences of your weak, irresponsible decisions. The woman slid down the wall again, completely drained. The baby now cried with a frailty that would break the heart of anyone with an ounce of humanity. But Marcus Wellington was not just anyone. He turned abruptly, giving his back to that scene of human misery. His Italian leather shoes struck the marble with military rhythm as he headed toward the building's entrance, where the polished bronze doors opened automatically, as if bowing before his presence. And Thompson, he called without turning. If I find any trace of that thing here again, you two will be out looking for work before lunch. Behind him, he could hear the heavy footsteps of the security guards approaching the woman and her baby, and the sound of desperate sobs echoing against the walls of his glass and steel empire. Marcus didn't even slow his pace. Marcus crossed the marble lobby with determined steps, his shoes echoing in the morning silence before the daily business chaos began. The private elevator doors opened instantly as it recognized his fingerprints, and he rode straight up to the 40th floor, where his office loomed over Manhattan like a celestial throne. 40 seconds later, he stood before the panoramic bulletproof glass windows, a steaming cup of Colombian coffee warming his hands. The rich, full aroma blended with the scent of Italian leather from his executive chair, creating an atmosphere of absolute luxury that sharply contrasted with the drama unfolding far below. From that height, people looked like ants, insignificant beings moving in predictable patterns across the granite sidewalks. Marcus adjusted his angle of vision, his eyes searching for the entrance to Wellington Plaza. And then he saw it. Thompson had grabbed the woman by her left arm, trying to lift her from the crouched position against the wall. Even at this distance, Marcus could see her pathetic resistance. her fragile limbs trembling like branches in the wind, desperately clinging to the blankets wrapped around the baby. "Pathetic," Marcus muttered, lifting the cup to his lips. The bitter coffee slid down his throat as he watched the scene like a Roman emperor watching gladiators in the arena. Rodriguez approached from the other side, and together, the two security guards tried to raise Sarah. She weighed so little she almost floated between their hands, her bare feet barely touching the ground. The baby, still in her arms, cried out with an intensity Marcus couldn't hear but could easily imagine. A sharp, desperate sound cutting through the morning air. The woman turned her face up, her lips moving quickly. Marcus didn't need to hear to know she was begging, pleading, trying to touch some thread of humanity in the hearts of the guards. Such naivete. Men on his payroll knew exactly where their loyalty lay. Sarah tried to break free, a sudden, desperate movement that made Thompson grip her thin arm even tighter. She staggered, nearly falling, but managed to stay on her feet, holding the baby protectively close to her chest. Marcus smiled coldly. That display of resistance only confirmed his decision. People like her didn't understand limits. They didn't respect private property. Giving them an inch meant they would take a mile, and before long, his entrance would be overrun with all kinds of vagrants and misfits down below. Sarah dropped to her knees on the cold marble, her hands stretched out to the guards in a universal plea. Her mouth opened and closed rapidly, desperate words tumbling out. Probably explaining she had nowhere else to go, the baby was sick, she just needed a few hours until some shelter opened. Marcus took another sip of coffee, savoring the bitterness of the bean along with the satisfaction of watching his men carry out orders without question. That's how an empire worked, with discipline, hierarchy, and the understanding that his word was law. Thompson made a sharp gesture, signaling Sarah to stand and walk. She tried to obey, her shaky legs struggling to support her, but exhaustion was evident in every movement. Weeks or months on the streets had drained every ounce of energy she might have once had. Then it happened. Sarah took 2 unsteady steps, the baby still pressed to her chest, and then her legs simply gave out. She collapsed like a building being demolished, falling sideways onto the granite sidewalk with an impact Marcus almost felt through the bulletproof glass. The baby flew from her arms at the moment of the fall, rolling several feet across the cold marble. The child, Marcus could now see she was a girl, no more than 10 or 12 months old, cried with renewed intensity, her tiny body writhing on the hard ground. Thompson and Rodriguez rushed to Sarah, who had lost consciousness. Marcus saw one guard kneel beside her, checking vital signs, while the other glanced around nervously, clearly worried about the attention the scene might attract from passers-by or building tenants. But it was the baby who held Marcus's attention. The little girl had stopped crying for a moment, as if processing her new situation. Then, with clumsy but determined movements, she started crawling. Her knees scraped against the rough granite, leaving tiny scratches Marcus couldn't see but could imagine. Marcus's heart did not race. His hands did not shake. He simply watched, with the same coldness with which he studied financial reports, as the baby crawled farther and farther away from her unconscious mother and the distracted guards. The girl crawled toward the street, her movements gaining speed as she found a smoother surface. The Fifth Avenue sidewalk stretched ahead like a dangerous path, beyond which the morning traffic of Manhattan was starting to intensify. Cars, taxis, and buses passed at steady speed, their drivers absorbed in their own concerns. Phone calls, radios, conversations. Completely unaware of the small human drama unfolding at the Wellington Plaza entrance, Marcus leaned forward slightly, his brows furrowed not with worry, but with scientific curiosity. How far would that child get? At what point would the guards realize they'd lost control of the situation? The baby kept moving, each motion of her tiny hands and knees bringing her a little closer to the curb. Where the sidewalk met the asphalt and real danger began on the 40th floor. Marcus Wellington took another sip of coffee and continued watching, waiting to see how his men would resolve this small display of incompetence. The child was now just a few feet from the street, and the roar of Fifth Avenue traffic filled the air like a river of metal and speed, ready to swallow anything small enough to go unnoticed. 15 minutes had passed when Marcus decided to go back downstairs. His coffee had cooled on the table, forgotten as he watched the chaos below through the bulletproof glass. The incompetence of his security guards irritated him deeply. How could two trained ex-military men lose control of such a simple situation? Thompson had managed to wake Sarah with gentle taps on her face, and now she was coughing violently, sitting on the sidewalk like a scarecrow battered by the wind. Rodriguez was speaking quickly into his radio, probably asking for instructions or an ambulance. The situation was turning into exactly the kind of public spectacle Marcus hated the most. He strode across the atrium, his footsteps ringing hard against the marble, echoing his growing fury. The bronze doors slid open automatically, and the cold October morning air hit him like a slap, carrying the sounds and smells of the city waking up. That's when the shouting started. "Watch out! Look! The baby! Someone grabbed that child!" Marcus looked up, his irritation shifting to alarm as he saw the small figure crawling straight toward him. The baby had crawled nearly the entire length of the sidewalk, her movements gaining speed and determination, as if some primal instinct was guiding her. Pedestrians stopped around, pointing and yelling, but no one dared get close. This was New York. People knew that getting involved in street situations could lead to legal troubles, lawsuits, problems nobody wanted to take on. The girl was now less than 10 feet away, her blue eyes, the same faded shade as her mother's, locked directly on his. There was something in that look that made Marcus stop abruptly, a kind of primitive recognition he couldn't explain. Behind the baby, Fifth Avenue traffic flowed relentlessly. A yellow taxi honked loudly as the tiny figure crawled dangerously close to the curb. The driver slowed, shouting curses through the open window, but didn't stop completely. Marcus felt something strange tighten in his chest. A sudden, almost painful squeeze. His feet moved before his rational mind could process it. In less than a tenth of a second, he was kneeling on the cold marble, hands reaching out to catch the child. "No, no, no," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The baby practically threw herself into his arms, as if she had been searching for him through all that dangerous journey. Her tiny hands clung to the lapel of his Armani suit, leaving small dirt marks on the immaculate fabric, though Marcus barely noticed. What froze him completely was what he felt against his palm. Something small and hard was firmly grasped in the baby's right hand. Marcus gently tried to open the fingers, but she held on with surprising strength for such a fragile child. It was as if that object was the most precious thing in the world to her. "What do you have there, little one?" Marcus heard his own voice, softer than he'd spoken in years. Perhaps decades, carefully. He managed to open one finger at a time, until the baby's hand unfolded like a blossoming flower. There, crumpled and worn from moisture and dirt, was a white plastic hospital bracelet. Marcus felt the world spin around him. The bracelet was stained, faded by time and harsh conditions, but some details were still legible. What made his heart stop completely was the word written by hand in ordinary blue pen. In a childlike, careful scrawl, "Daddy." His hands trembled. Marcus Wellington, who never trembled, who ruled steel and concrete empires with a firm grip, felt his fingers falter as he held that small strip of plastic. The baby looked at him with huge, trusting eyes, as if he were the answer to all her silent prayers. Her lips moved soundlessly, maybe trying to say her first words, or perhaps just mirroring the movements she saw on the face of the man holding her. "This can't be," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise of traffic and the restless voices of the gathering crowd. With still shaking hands, he turned the bracelet over, searching for more information. The plastic was worn, some letters almost faded, but he could discern fragments of the printed text. Date of birth, medical information, hospital codes that somehow seemed disturbingly familiar. Reality began to collapse around him like a house of cards. The street sounds grew distant and muffled, as if someone had turned down the world's volume. His breathing became irregular, his chest rising and falling out of sync. The baby extended a dirty little hand toward his face, touching his cheek with the innocence of someone who doesn't understand the weight of the moment. That simple touch sent an electric shock through his entire being, awakening memories he had buried so deeply, he thought they were dead forever. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, trying to regain control, trying to find the coldness that had always defined him. But when he opened them again, all he could see was that child, that blue-eyed girl staring at him with absolute, inexplicable confidence. He gripped the bracelet tighter, bringing it closer to his eyes, forcing his vision, blurred by shock, to focus on the printed words that were still readable. Reality shattered around him like tempered glass hit by a bullet. Marcus forced his blurry eyes to focus on the hospital bracelet, each letter printed on it becoming a death sentence for the man he thought he was. The worn plastic trembled between his fingers as he read it once, twice, 3 times, as if repeating the act could change what was written there. Baby Mitchell mother. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. The name pierced his chest like an ice-cold spear, each syllable echoing in his mind like an earthquake. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. Is Sarah. 2 words he hadn't spoken in 2 years. 2 words he had locked away in a heavily guarded emotional vault, along with all the other memories he preferred to forget. But now, they came rushing back like an avalanche, burying him under the weight of a guilt he had never allowed himself to feel. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. She had been more than just a casual lover, more than a distraction between board meetings and hostile takeovers. For 6 months, she had been the only person brave enough to challenge his opinions, who laughed at his sarcastic remarks, who saw him as Marcus, not as the empire he had built. Sarah, with her silky brown hair and blue eyes that seemed to look right through all his defenses. Sarah, who worked as a nurse at Mount Sinai and came home with stories of lives she had helped save. Sarah, who cooked for him on weekends and made him laugh in a way he had forgotten was possible. Sarah, who had vanished from his life like smoke in the wind, without explanations, confrontations, or goodbyes. Except there was a goodbye. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut but couldn't stop the memory from flooding in. Their last meeting in her apartment on the Upper East Side. She had tried to talk to him about something important, her voice tense, her eyes shining with unshed tears. But he was distracted, irritated after missing an important meeting. His phone kept ringing nonstop with emergency calls about a financial crisis at the company. He barely paid attention to what she was trying to say. Marcus, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. But he hadn't listened. He was too busy typing on his phone, answering emails that seemed urgent at the time and now seemed utterly trivial. I'm pregnant, Marcus. 2 words he heard but didn't process. 2 words he pushed deep into the back of his mind, along with all the other responsibilities he preferred to avoid. You're not listening, she said, her voice breaking. You never really listened to me. Then she stood up, walking toward the door, turning once more to look at him. One day you'll understand what really matters, Marcus. I hope when that day comes, it's not too late. Those were the last words Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell ever said to him. Then she was gone, leaving behind only an empty apartment and a phone number that rang endlessly into the void. He assumed she was being dramatic, that she would come back eventually. After all, they always came back. But Sarah never did. Now, kneeling on the cold sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, Marcus held the consequence of his arrogance, his inability to see beyond himself. The baby in his arms was not just any child. She was his daughter. His daughter. Those 2 words echoed in his mind like cathedral bells, each ring louder than the last. The air grew thin, his lungs struggling to work properly. His legs, which had supported him during billion-dollar negotiations, simply gave out. Marcus Wellington, the man who had never bowed to anyone, collapsed to his knees on the busy Manhattan sidewalk. Around him, the world kept spinning. Executives rushed by, talking on phones, carrying leather briefcases. Tourists snapped photos of skyscrapers. Street vendors shouted special deals. But some people stopped. They began to form a small circle around the kneeling man holding a baby, whispering to each other, trying to make sense of what was happening. Isn't that the guy from TV? Marcus Wellington? The billionaire. What is he doing with a child? Someone should call the police. Marcus barely heard the voices. His world had shrunk to 2 things, the baby in his arms and the hospital bracelet on his trembling hand. That he looked at the child, at his daughter, and truly saw her for the first time. That's when he noticed. The eyes. They weren't blue like Sarah's. They were green, deep emerald green, with tiny flecks of gold around the pupils. They were exactly like his daughter's. The child stared at him with innocent curiosity. Marcus saw his own reflection in those small, perfect eyes. The same intensity, the The same slightly almond shape, even the same tiny wrinkle at the left corner when she furrowed her brow at IT was like looking at himself 40 years ago. Before the world hardened him, before ambition consumed him, before he became the man capable of casting out both his daughter and her mother onto the street. "My God," he whispered, his voice breaking completely. "My God, what have I done?" Tears came without warning, rolling down the face of a man who hadn't cried in decades. They fell onto the baby's tiny hand, which immediately reached up to touch the wet face of the father she had never known. And in that moment, kneeling on the cold sidewalk, watched by dozens of strangers, Marcus Wellington finally understood what Sarah had tried to tell him 2 years ago. He finally understood what really mattered. Marcus rose from the ground with an urgency he had never felt before. His legs trembled, but a desperate energy pushed him toward the place where he had last seen Sarah. The baby, his daughter, remained quiet in his arms, as if sensing the emotional storm ravaging the man holding her. "Thompson, Rodriguez." His voice echoed down Fifth Avenue with an intensity that made several people turn around. "Where is she? Where did you take the woman?" But when he arrived, he found only a wet stain on the sidewalk where Sarah had been lying. His security team was nowhere to be seen, and a wave of absolute despair began to rise in his chest. Marcus spun around, his eyes scanning every possible direction. The Manhattan morning crowd flowed past him like a human river, thousands of anonymous faces moving without pause. Sarah could be anywhere, vanishing again into the vastness of the city. "No, no, no," he murmured, clutching the baby tighter to his chest. "I can't lose her again." His phone was in his hand before he even realized it. With trembling fingers, he dialed Thompson's number, each ring sounding like an eternity. "Mr. Wellington?" Thompson's voice came through, with traffic noises in the background. "Where the hell are you?" Marcus shouted, ignoring the curious stares around him. "Where's the woman?" "Sir, we took her to..." "Well, she said she didn't want to go to the hospital. She was delirious, talking about finding her daughter. Rodriguez managed to calm her down, and she asked to be taken to Washington Square Park. She said that's where she always goes when she needs to think." Marcus felt a mix of relief and panic. Sarah was alive, but still out there, alone, probably searching for the daughter now secure in his arms. "Listen carefully, Thompson." His voice hardened, a tone he rarely used, even with employees. "I want you to find that woman. Now, I don't care if you have to search every bench, every corner of that park. $100,000 for whoever brings Sarah Mitchell back to me. $100,000, Thompson. You hear me?" "Yes, sir. 100,000. Understood. And call everyone else. I want every member of my security team searching. Call Blackwater Security, Elite Protective Services. Hire every private investigator you can find. Money is no object." Marcus hung up the phone and immediately dialed another number. Then another, and another. Within 15 minutes, he had launched a small private war through the streets of New York, all focused on finding a woman he had lost because of his own arrogance. As he spoke on the phone, his eyes caught the hospital wristband still in his hand. There was more information printed on it that he hadn't fully read. Heart pounding, he brought the worn plastic close to his eyes, forcing himself to read every word. What he saw made him sit heavily on the marble step of the building. Congenital heart disease, ventricular septal defect, surgery recommended, monthly cardiology follow-up required. The medical terms hit him like punches to the stomach. His daughter, his little girl, was sick, seriously sick. And for 2 years, while he built his empire and amassed more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, his daughter had been suffering. Marcus looked down at the baby in his arms with new eyes. Now he could see what he had missed before. The slight paleness of her skin, the breathing a little faster than normal, how easily she grew tired. "My God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You need medical help. You need surgery, and I wasn't here." Guilt crashed over him like a giant wave, dragging him into an emotional abyss he'd never known. All his life, he had measured success in numbers, how many zeros in his bank account, how many buildings he owned, how many companies he acquired. But in that moment, looking at the daughter he didn't know existed, He realized he had failed at the only thing that truly mattered. Being a father. Being human. Tears ran down his face, and this time he didn't try to stop them. Executives passing by on the sidewalk stopped to stare, whispering among themselves at the unusual sight of Marcus Wellington crying in public. "I'm sorry," he murmured to the baby, his voice so low he could barely hear himself. "I'm sorry, my little one. Daddy didn't know. Daddy was an idiot. A coward. A terrible man who didn't deserve you or your mother." The baby stretched a tiny hand toward his face, touching one of the tears sliding down his cheek. That simple, innocent touch shattered the last defenses Marcus had built over the years. He held the small hand against his face, closed his eyes, and let all the pain he'd held back for decades finally surface. He cried for Sarah, the woman he had lost, for the daughter he never met, for the 2 years of life lost to his own stupidity. "I'm going to fix this," he whispered, his voice heavy with a determination beyond business, beyond money, beyond everything he had known before. "I promise you, my little one, Daddy's going to fix everything. I'm going to find your mother, take care of your health, and be the father you deserve." The baby looked up at him with those green eyes, so much like his own, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington made a promise that meant more than any contract he'd ever signed. It was a promise made with tears, a broken heart, and a man who had finally found something more important than himself. His daughter smiled then, a small, perfect smile, and Marcus knew that no matter the cost, he would keep his word. The phone rang at 3:47 p.m. Marcus was in his apartment office. Surrounded by maps of Manhattan and lists of shelters he had ordered his investigators to check. His daughter was sleeping in an improvised crib he had delivered, the most expensive crib money could buy, yet it seemed insignificant compared to the precious life resting in it. "Mr. Wellington?" Rodriguez's voice was tense, urgent. "We found her." Marcus felt his heart race. "Where?" "St. Mary's Shelter, in the South Bronx." "Sir, she's not well." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, not well?" "She's unconscious, sir. The volunteers said she arrived 2 days ago, delirious and running a high fever. They don't have enough resources to care for her properly." Marcus was already moving, carefully lifting his daughter from the crib. "Prepare the car, now, and call Mount Sinai. I want a private ambulance meeting us there." "It's on its way, sir." The trip to the Bronx felt like the longest of Marcus's life. Manhattan traffic moved at its usual slow pace, every red light stretching out like an eternity. He held his daughter close, whispering soothing words he wasn't sure were meant for her or for himself. "Your mother's going to be okay," he murmured repeatedly. "Daddy is going to take care of both of you now. I promise." When the car finally pulled up in front of the shelter, Marcus barely waited for Rodriguez to open the door. The building was a worn brick structure, with cracked windows and a hand-painted sign that read, "St. Mary's Shelter. All are welcome." The irony was not lost on him. Sarah had sought refuge in the one place Marcus Wellington would never have thought to look. The smell hit him as soon as he stepped inside. It was a mix of cheap disinfectant, reheated food, and the unmistakable odor of many people living in tight quarters. Rows of metal bunk beds filled the main hall, occupied by men, women, and children who had lost everything. "Please," Marcus addressed the first person he saw in a white coat, a middle-aged woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. "I'm looking for Sarah Mitchell. I was told she's here." She studied him for a moment, her eyes taking in the $3,000 suit, the watch costing more than she earned in a year, the obviously well-cared-for baby in his arms. "Are you family?" "I am—" Marcus hesitated, realizing he didn't have the right words. "She's the mother of my daughter." Something in his expression must have convinced the woman, because she nodded and led him through the crowded hall. "I'm Dr. Patricia Hendricks. I volunteer here 3 times a week." Sarah arrived Tuesday, she explained, carrying only an old backpack and delirious with fever. She kept repeating a name, a child's name, Emma, I believe. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Emma? She was looking for someone named Emma. We assumed it was her daughter. They stopped in front of an improvised cot set up in a quieter corner of the shelter. And there was Sarah. Marcus barely recognized her. The vibrant, strong woman he had known was gone, replaced by a ghostly version of herself. Sarah had lost at least 45 pounds. Her brown hair was dull and plastered to her face with sweat. Her skin was a sickly pale, and he could hear every labored breath she took. Sarah? The word escaped him like a groan. She developed pneumonia, Dr. Hendricks said, checking Sarah's pulse with experienced fingers. It was probably incubating for weeks. Her immune system is completely compromised, malnutrition, extreme stress, physical exhaustion. Marcus knelt beside the cot, still holding his daughter. With his free hand, he gently touched Sarah's face, feeling the feverish heat radiating from her skin. How did this happen? He whispered. Dr. Hendricks sighed, her eyes full of a sadness Marcus recognized as someone who had witnessed a great deal of suffering. I spoke with her the first night, while she was still semi-conscious. She told me her story. The doctor paused, studying Marcus closely. She said she worked 3 jobs to pay for the baby's heart treatment. Nurse in the morning, retail clerk in the afternoon, cleaning offices at night. She was sleeping 3 hours a night, eating 1 meal a day. Each word felt like a stab in Marcus's chest. And the baby? She left her with an elderly neighbor during the day, but the woman passed away last month. Sarah couldn't afford a caregiver anymore, so she started bringing the baby to work when she could. She lost 2 jobs because of this. Marcus closed his eyes, picturing Sarah running from job to job, carrying their sick daughter, sacrificing everything, including her own health, to keep the child alive. All because he had been too cowardly to listen when she tried to tell him she was pregnant. The medical bills, Dr. Hendricks continued, have already exceeded $200,000. Her insurance covers only a fraction. She sold everything, car, furniture, jewelry. She even stopped buying her own medications to pay for the babies. The guilt Marcus felt turned into something deeper, more devastating. It wasn't just guilt. It was the crushing realization that he had destroyed the lives of the 2 people who mattered most in the world, and he hadn't even noticed. Doctor, his voice was hoarse. Will she be okay? Dr. Hendricks hesitated. She needs immediate hospitalization, intravenous antibiotics, fluids, intensive care. But she looked around at the overcrowded shelter. We don't have the resources. We managed to give her some basic antibiotics, but it's not enough. And how much would it cost? The full treatment. For her and the baby. For Sarah, probably $50,000 to stabilize her, plus another $50,000 for full recovery. For the baby, the heart surgery she needs runs between $300,000 and $500,000, depending on complexity. Marcus almost laughed. $500,000. He had spent more than that on a single art piece last month. He had invested 20 times that amount in stocks just the week before, simply because his broker thought it would be fun. Money is not a problem, he said firmly. No problem at all. Dr. Hendricks studied him again, this time with a mix of hope and skepticism. Marcus leaned over Sarah, holding their daughter in one arm while stroking Sarah's damp hair with the other. Sarah, he whispered, his voice breaking. My love, forgive me. Please, forgive me for being so stupid, so blind, so completely useless. The words came out like a confession, loaded with years of regret he didn't even know he carried. I love you, he continued, his voice now barely a murmur. I always have, but I was too cowardly to admit it. I thought love was weakness, commitment a trap. But you're strong in a way I never could be. You sacrificed everything for our daughter, while I didn't even know she existed. Sarah didn't respond, but Marcus swore her breathing became slightly less labored. I'm going to fix this, he promised. I will fix everything. You both will have the best doctors, the best care. Our daughter will have surgery at the best hospital in the country. And you will recover because I need you to forgive me. I need a chance to be the man you deserve. With extreme care, Marcus slid his arms under Sarah, lifting her from the makeshift cot. She weighed almost nothing, her body devastated from fighting to keep their daughter alive. "Rodriguez!" he shouted. "Where's the ambulance?" "It's arriving now, sir." As he carried Sarah toward the exit, Marcus could feel every set of eyes in the shelter on him. Men, women, and children who had lost everything, watching a billionaire carry a woman who had chosen to live among them instead of searching for the father of her child. The irony was not lost on him. In the poorest shelter in the Bronx, Marcus Wellington had found the greatest treasure of his life. And he had almost been too late to save her. Mount Sinai Hospital had turned into a medical fortress under the command of Marcus Wellington. Within hours, he had assembled a team that felt more like a military operation than a hospital treatment. Dr. Jonathan Chun, the most renowned pediatric cardiologist on the East Coast, had canceled his vacation in the Hamptons. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a pulmonology specialist, had flown in from Boston on a private jet. Dr. Michael Harrison, head of the intensive care unit, had been called back from a conference in Chicago. Specialized nurses, anesthetists, technicians, all the best money could buy, were gathered in less than 6 hours. "I want to fully understand the situation," Marcus said firmly as the doctors gathered in the private conference room he had reserved on the 14th floor. His daughter slept in his arms, connected to portable monitors tracking every fragile heartbeat. Dr. Chun adjusted his glasses, studying the test results from the last 2 hours. "The baby has a complex ventricular septal defect. Essentially, there is a significant hole between the heart's lower chambers. Without surgery, she likely won't make it to her first birthday." The words hit Marcus like a hammer. "And with surgery?" "With surgery, assuming there are no complications, she could have a completely normal life. But it's an extremely complex operation. We'll need to use a heart-lung machine, repair the defect with a pericardial patch, and there's always a risk." "How much?" Marcus interrupted. "Excuse me, how much will it cost?" "The whole operation, the best equipment, the best possible team." Dr. Chun exchanged glances with the other doctors. "Mr. Wellington, with all due respect, cost shouldn't be 2 million, Marcus asked directly. 3? 5? I don't care. I want her to have everything. Approximately 1.8 million, Dr. Chun admitted. That includes intensive post-operative care for several weeks, possible complications. Approved. Marcus didn't hesitate. "And the mother?" Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. "Sarah is in critical condition. The pneumonia has spread to both lungs. Her immune system is severely compromised. We had to induce a coma to give her body a chance to fight without the stress of consciousness. Will she survive?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Dr. Rodriguez chose her words carefully. "She's young, which is positive. But the damage caused by malnutrition and extreme exhaustion. Mr. Wellington, she literally killed herself working to keep her daughter alive. Her body has been operating on reserves depleted months ago." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. "Do everything, whatever it takes." The next 5 days became a blur of frantic medical activity and silent vigil. Marcus turned a private suite in the hospital into his temporary office, refusing to leave the floor where Sarah and his daughter were admitted. Executives came to him for urgent signatures, but his attention was always split between medical reports and the monitors recording the vital signs of the 2 most important people in his life. It was on the 3rd day that he found the letters. He was organizing the few belongings Sarah had brought along: a worn backpack holding 2 changes of clothes, some documents, and a small envelope tied with faded red string. Inside the envelope were 4 handwritten letters on cheap notebook paper, each addressed to Emma, my little warrior. With trembling hands, Marcus opened the first letter, dated 3 months earlier. "My dear Emma, today you turned 6 months old, and the doctor said you're getting stronger every day. I know you don't understand yet, but Mommy is working very hard to give you everything you need. Your medicines cost more than I make in a month, but it's worth every penny to see you smile. Sometimes I think about your daddy. I don't blame him for not being here. He doesn't know you exist, and that's partly my fault too. Maybe one day he'll be brave enough to have a real family. Maybe one day he'll realize money can't buy what truly matters. Until then, it's just the 2 of us, my little one. And that's enough. All my love, Mommy, Marcus had to stop reading. Tears blurred his vision. Every word from Sarah was a gentle but devastating accusation of his own failures. The second letter was from 2 months ago, right after Sarah had lost one of her jobs. Emma, Mommy lost her job at the restaurant today. The manager said, I can't bring you with me during shifts anymore. I know you don't like staying with Mrs. Patterson. She smells like cats and doesn't hold you right. But she's the only person I can afford to take care of you. I found another job cleaning offices at night. The pay is less, but at least I can take you with me. You sleep so peacefully in your stroller while Mommy works. It must be nice to dream when you don't yet know the world's worries. Your daddy probably never had to choose between paying rent and buying medicine. I hope when you grow up, you choose to be someone who understands kindness is worth more than wealth. I love you more than all the stars. Mommy, the third letter was written only a month ago, and Sarah's handwriting showed signs of exhaustion. My sweet Emma, Mrs. Patterson died last week. She wasn't perfect, but she loved you in her own strange way. Now I have no one to care for you during the day, and I lost the hospital job because I had to bring you with me. I'm scared. Dear, for the first time since you were born, I'm really scared. We have food for 3 more days, and after that, I don't know what we'll do. I think about calling your father every day. I have his number, But what if he says you're not his daughter? What if he sends us away? I think I'd rather fight alone than face his rejection again. Maybe I'm a coward too, in my own way. But I promise I will protect you. Somehow we'll make it. All my strength for you, Mommy. The fourth and final letter was dated just a week ago. Written in shaky handwriting Marcus could barely decipher. Emma, I think I'm getting sick. I've been coughing a lot, and yesterday I almost fainted at work. But I can't stop. You need the surgery, and there's still $50,000 missing. If something happens to me, I want you to know you were the best gift life ever gave me. You taught me that true love means sacrifice, that being a mother means giving everything of yourself and still finding more to give. Your daddy is Marcus Wellington. He lives on Park Avenue, has green eyes like yours, and one day, maybe when he's older and wiser, he will be the man worthy of being your father. Until then, Mommy will take care of you. If he's reading this, something went wrong. Marcus, she is your daughter. Look into her eyes and you will see. And please, don't let my illness be in vain. Love her the way I couldn't teach you to love us. Forever yours, Sarah. Marcus let the letter fall from his hands, sobbing with an intensity that made the nurses in the hallway look through the glass door. In those scraps of cheap paper, Sarah had captured not only her own journey of sacrifice but also the persistent hope that he could be better than he was. She had still believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. Mr. Wellington? Dr. Chun appeared at the door. It's time. Marcus quickly composed himself, slipping the letters into the inside pocket of his jacket. The surgery? Yes, sir. Everything is ready. The operation lasted 7 hours. Marcus spent every minute pacing the hospital corridors. His daughter finally out of his arms for the first time in days. The operating room had become a closed world where New York's best doctors fought to repair a heart that shouldn't have to struggle so soon for life. 2:15 a.m. Dr. Chun emerged from surgery, removing his mask with hands still trembling slightly from hours of meticulous work. Mr. Wellington. Marcus jumped up from the chair where he had finally allowed himself to sit. How is she? Dr. Chun smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen in days. The surgery was a complete success. We managed to repair the defect without complications. Her heart is beating strong and regularly. With proper care, Emma should have a completely normal life. The relief Marcus felt was so intense he had to lean against the wall. Can I see her? In an hour, once she's stable in recovery. But, Mr. Wellington, Dr. Chen's smile faded. We need to talk about Sarah. Marcus's heart clenched. Has she gotten worse? Not worse, but not better either. We're on the 5th day of the induced coma. Normally, we'd expect to see more progress by now. Her lungs are responding to treatment, but slowly. Very slowly. Marcus closed his eyes. What does that mean? It means the next days are critical. If she doesn't show significant improvement in the next 48 hours. Dr. Chun didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus looked out the window at Manhattan's night sky, where the city lights shone indifferent to the human drama unfolding inside the hospital. His daughter was saved, but the woman who had sacrificed everything to keep her alive was still fighting between life and death. Money had bought the best surgery in the world for Emma, but it couldn't buy time for Sarah. Couldn't undo the months of sacrifice that had destroyed her body. It couldn't erase the years of absence that led to this desperate situation. For the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington faced a problem that all his fortune couldn't solve, and as he prepared for another night of vigil, he held Sarah's letters to his chest and whispered a prayer he never thought he would say. The hospital room was bathed in the quiet typical of the early morning hours when Sarah opened her eyes. The soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting a golden pattern on the spotless white walls. For a moment, she lay still, blinking slowly as her mind struggled to process where she was. The sound of the medical monitors, so different from the chaotic noises of the shelter, slowly brought her back to reality. Tubes in her arms, the feeling of breathing deeply without pain for the first time in months. And then, Emma. The word slipped out like a hoarse whisper from her dry lips. Marcus, who had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed with his head resting on the mattress edge, woke immediately. His clothes were wrinkled, the same suit he'd been wearing for 3 days, and his face showed the stubble Sarah had never seen before. Sarah, he stood up so quickly the chair almost tipped over. You're awake. Sarah's eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for the familiar sound of her daughter's breathing. Where is she? Where's Emma? Is she okay? Oh God, she was so sick. She's fine, Marcus said quickly, his voice breaking with emotion. More than fine. Sarah, she had the surgery. It was a complete success. Sarah tried to sit up, but weakness made her stagger. Marcus instinctively moved closer to help, but hesitated, as if unsure whether he had the right to touch her. The surgery? Sarah's words were heavy with disbelief. But the money, I couldn't pay. I paid. I paid for everything. The best doctors, the best team, everything she needed. Tears began to roll down Sarah's face. How did you know? How did you find us? I was looking for you, Marcus confessed, his voice low and full of regret. Since you left New York, I was searching, but I was too scared to admit why. It took me 2 years to realize I was looking for you because... He paused, swallowing hard. Because I love you. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely. Marcus? No, he interrupted, squeezing her hands. Please let me speak. Let me apologize for everything. I was an idiot, Sarah. A complete, selfish idiot. When you tried to tell me about the pregnancy, I ran away, like a coward. I thought I was protecting my freedom, but I was just protecting my fear. He stood up only to kneel directly on the cold hospital floor beside her bed, both knees pressing into the tile. You sacrificed everything for our daughter. You worked 3 jobs, sold everything you owned. Literally worked yourself to exhaustion to keep her alive. And I was buying expensive art and worrying about corporate mergers. Sarah opened her eyes, studying Marcus's face. There was something different about him, a vulnerability she had never seen in the years they'd known each other. You don't understand, she said softly. I didn't leave New York because I was mad at you. Marcus looked at her, confused. You didn't. I left because I knew you better than you knew yourself. Sarah struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring the still throbbing pain in her chest. I knew if I told you about the pregnancy then, you'd do the right thing. Marry me, support the baby, but only out of obligation. Sarah. No, let me finish. She gently touched his face. I didn't want a husband who felt trapped or a father who saw our daughter as a financial burden. I wanted you to figure out for yourself what really matters in life. Marcus took her hand and pressed it to his cheek. And now I have. Maybe too late, but I've realized it. It's not too late, Sarah whispered. You're here now. May I bring her to you? Marcus asked hesitantly. Emma is in the special nursery, but the doctor said when you woke up. Please, Sarah said, her tears growing stronger. I need to see her. I need to make sure she's really okay. Marcus quickly went to the door, calling the nurses. Within minutes, Dr. Chun appeared pushing a special bassinet equipped with discreet monitors. Inside, Emma slept peacefully, her skin rosy and healthy in a way Sarah hadn't seen for months. "Look at her," Marcus said, his voice full of wonder. "Look how strong she is." Sarah extended her trembling arms, and Marcus carefully placed Emma on her chest. The baby stirred softly, her green eyes, just like Marcus's, opening to focus on her mother's face. "Hi, my little warrior," Sarah murmured, stroking Emma's fine hair. "Mommy's here. You're so strong, so brave." Marcus watched mother and daughter reunite, feeling an emotion he couldn't name swelling in his chest. It was as if he was seeing for the first time what it truly meant to love someone more than his own life. "Sarah," he said softly, "there's something I need to show you." He pulled the wrinkled letters from the inside pocket of his blazer, the letters Sarah had written to Emma during the hardest months. "I read them," he admitted, his hands shaking as he held the papers. "I read every single one, and in each one you still believed I could be better. Even when you were literally starving, you still had hope for me." Sarah looked at the letters, recognizing them immediately. "You shouldn't have—" "No, I needed to read them," Marcus interrupted. "I needed to understand what you went through, what you both went through because of my cowardice." He carefully sat on the edge of the bed, looking at Sarah and Emma, his family. "You wrote that you hoped I'd be brave enough someday to have a real family, that maybe I'd realize money can't buy what really matters." He paused, tears starting to fall. "You were right about everything. Marcus, I'm in love with you, Sarah. Completely, desperately in love. I think I always was, but I was so afraid of becoming vulnerable that I pretended it was just physical attraction." He gently touched Emma's face, and the baby grasped his finger with her tiny hand. "And our daughter is the most incredible miracle that's ever happened in my life." Sarah saw the absolute sincerity in his eyes. This was not the cold, distant Marcus she'd known before. This was a man completely transformed by the experience of almost losing everything that truly mattered. "I've changed," Marcus continued. "Not just because I need to, but because I want to. I want to be the man you both deserve. I want to wake up every day knowing my only real priority is to take care of my family." He stood again, this time reaching into his pants pocket. His hands visibly trembling, he pulled out a small velvet box. "I bought this on the second day you were in a coma," he said, opening the box to reveal a simply stunning ring. Not flashy or ostentatious, but elegant and timeless. "I sat by your side, holding Emma, realizing that if you died, I'd never have the chance to ask you to forgive me. I'd never be able to ask you to marry me." Sarah's tears flowed harder as she looked at the ring, then at Marcus, then at her sleeping daughter in her arms. "Sarah Mitchell." Marcus knelt again, holding out the ring to her. "You saved me from an empty, meaningless life. You gave me the most precious thing in the world, our daughter, and taught me that true love means sacrifice. It means putting others before yourself." His voice broke completely, and he had to pause to compose himself before continuing. "I'm not asking you to marry me out of obligation or because of Emma. I'm asking because I can't imagine spending a single day of my life without you. Because when I thought I was going to lose you, I realized all my money, all my success, my whole life means nothing without you in it." He held the ring higher, his eyes meeting hers. "Will you marry me? Not because you have to, but because you love me? Because you want to build a real life with me? A life based on love, not fear." Sarah looked at Marcus kneeling before her, then at Emma in her arms, then at the ring that represented not just a promise, but a complete transformation. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. "Yes, Marcus, I love you. I've always loved you." With trembling hands, Marcus slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, then sat on the bed beside her. Carefully, he wrapped his arms around them both, his fiancée and his daughter, forming a perfect circle of love and protection. Emma chose that moment to open her eyes again, looking straight at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. And when she smiled, the first real smile of her little life. Marcus knew with absolute certainty he had found his home. "We are a family now," he murmured against Sarah's hair. "A real family." And for the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington fully understood what it truly means to be rich. 6 months later, Mount Sinai Hospital had become an emotional pilgrimage site for Marcus Wellington. Every Monday morning, he returned, not as a desperate man racing against time, but as a devoted father taking his daughter to routine checkups that were now just precautionary. Emma Wellington, named by Sarah in honor of the father she would never have met, but who would have been proud of the strength shown by his granddaughter, was unrecognizable as the fragile baby who nearly died in those hallways. At 10 months old, she was sturdy and cheerful, with Marcus's bright green eyes and Sarah's sweet smile. "Daddy!" Emma shouted, reaching out with her chubby arms as Marcus lifted her from the stroller at the hospital reception. That word still made his heart race every time he heard it. "Hey, champ," Marcus said, kissing his daughter's forehead. "Ready to show Dr. Chan how big you've gotten?" Sarah smiled, watching the father and daughter. She was radiant. Her hair had regained its shine. Her face showed a healthy weight, and her eyes sparkled with a happiness Marcus didn't think was possible. The simple wedding band he'd given her at the hospital was still the only ring she wore, refusing anything more extravagant. "She's heavier than a sack of potatoes," Marcus joked, making Emma giggle with that bubbly sound that had become the favorite soundtrack of his life. Dr. Chun greeted them in his office with the warm smile of someone who had witnessed a miracle. "Look at this girl. Emma, do you remember me?" To everyone's surprise, Emma waved to the doctor, a gesture she had learned recently and used with everyone she met. "Amazing," Dr. Chun said, listening to Emma's heart with his stethoscope. "Perfect heartbeat, clear breathing, excellent growth. Honestly, if I didn't know her story, I would never guess this baby had complex heart surgery." Marcus felt the familiar wave of gratitude that hit him every time he got this kind of good news. "Can she do everything a normal child does?" "Everything," Dr. Chun confirmed. "Running, playing sports when she's older. Her heart is working perfectly. It's one of the most complete recoveries I've ever seen." After the appointment, Marcus took his family to the hospital cafeteria, the same place where he had spent many sleepless nights, fueled only by coffee and despair. "Now," Emma clapped joyfully in her high chair while Sarah cut small pieces of banana for her. "You know," Sarah said, watching Marcus play airplane with the spoon to make Emma eat, "I never imagined you'd become such a natural dad." Marcus laughed, wiping banana puree from Emma's chin. "Neither did I. Honestly, 6 months ago, I didn't even know how to hold a baby properly. And now you change diapers better than I do," Sarah teased. "Hey, I had a great teacher," Marcus said, kissing his wife's forehead. "And lots of practice." Marcus's life had changed in ways he never imagined possible. Wellington Industries was still thriving, but now operated under a completely different philosophy. He had promoted his most capable team members to executive positions, letting them manage daily operations while he focused on projects that truly mattered. The Sarah and Emma Wellington Foundation, Sarah had insisted on including their daughter's name after she was born, was now one of the largest single-mother support organizations in the country. With an initial investment of $4 billion from Marcus's personal fortune, the foundation operated free medical clinics in 12 cities, provided temporary housing for families in crisis, and offered job training programs for women seeking independence. "Remember when you said I'd find out what money can really buy?" Marcus asked Sarah as they watched Emma play with a colorful plastic toy. "I remember. You were right. Money can buy hope, can buy second chances. It can buy the opportunity for others to find what we found." Sarah took Marcus's hand across the table. "Are you proud of what we built?" "I'm proud of who we've become," Marcus corrected. "You taught me that true wealth isn't in the bank account. It's in this." He gestured toward Emma, who was now trying to put a plastic spoon into her mouth. "It's waking up every day knowing your life has purpose." After lunch, Marcus suggested a walk through the hospital corridors. It was a strange tradition he had developed, revisiting the places where he nearly lost everything. They passed the ICU where Emma had spent her critical first weeks, the room where Sarah had fought pneumonia, the waiting room where Marcus had learned what it really meant to pray. "Right here," Marcus said, stopping in front of a window overlooking the parking lot. "This is where I found you that first day. You were holding Emma, and she was so small, so fragile." Sarah stepped closer, Emma now sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I was so scared. I thought you were going to send us away." "I almost did," Marcus admitted. "For about 5 seconds, my first reaction was to run away again, until I looked in his eyes and saw what? Saw myself, but not the selfish, cowardly version I was. I saw who I could become if I was brave enough to try." Marcus held Emma close, the baby instinctively snuggling against his chest. "You know the irony of all this?" "What?" "I spent my whole life building an empire, thinking that would make me important. Thinking financial success was the only measure of a man's value." He looked down at Emma, who had opened her eyes and was staring right at him. "But the only thing that ever really made me feel important was when this little girl first held my finger and smiled." Sarah leaned on Marcus's arm, watching father and daughter. "Do you think you would have figured that out on your own? If I'd never shown up here with Emma?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Honestly? No. I was on autopilot, Sarah. Buying bigger and bigger things, closing bigger and bigger deals, but never stopping to ask why. Never stopping to ask what I really wanted out of life. And now, you know? Now I know I want to wake up every day knowing my family is safe and happy. I want Emma to grow up seeing that a real man takes care of the people he loves. I want her to know that wealth means having people in your life you love more than yourself." Emma chose that moment to do something she'd recently started. She placed her tiny hand on Marcus's face and made a noise that vaguely sounded like, "Daddy." "She's trying to talk," Sarah said, smiling. "She's a genius," Marcus said with the over-the-top pride typical of new dads. "Clearly inherited her mother's brains. And her father's stubbornness?" Sarah shot back. Laughing, Marcus looked out the window at the parking lot where his life had changed forever, then at the hallway where he'd run with Emma in his arms, desperate to save her. Now the same baby was healthy and strong in his arms, and the woman who almost died to keep her alive stood beside him as his wife. "I almost lost you too," he said softly. "Almost lost the most important thing that ever happened to me because I was afraid to commit. Afraid to be vulnerable. But you didn't lose us," Sarah said, kissing his cheek. "We're here. We're a family." "We're a family," Marcus repeated, savoring the words. "And I promise I'll never forget what that means." Emma began to stir, signaling she was ready to go home. As they walked toward the hospital exit, Marcus silently said goodbye to the place where he discovered that true love wasn't a weakness, but the greatest strength a man could have 6 months ago. He was Marcus Wellington, the billionaire. Today, he was simply Marcus, husband, father, and the richest man in the world in every way that truly mattered. And as he carried his healthy daughter, holding the hand of his beloved wife, Marcus finally understood that it had taken him 40 years to discover what it truly means to be alive. Arrogance almost cost him everything, but love saved them all.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These other stories will also move you. Click to keep watching.